Hello, everybody. I think we're just admitting people from the waiting room and the lobby. Katie, who's assisting, is doing that now, and I'm just going to wait for a heads up from her before we get going, but we'll leave it for a couple of minutes. Entertain yourselves. Katie, do you want to give me a bit of a thumbs up? Should we give it a go? We got people waiting?
I've admitted everyone that's waiting so far. We've got about 13 people at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll crack on then, given that we've gone past the start time. So welcome to you all. Quite a select gathering for this Woody Habitats update on the Devon Local Nature Recovery Strategy. I'm Ross Kennerley. I'm freelance environmental community consultant. Previously worked with Devon Wildlife Trust, previously with local authorities, and more recently with the Woodland Trust as regional director. Probably known to quite a few of you who are on the screen. I've been supported by Katie Pagan, who's part of the Local Nature Recovery Strategy team working at Devon County Council. I'm going to do a quick intro, run through a series of slides, hopefully 40-45 minutes tops, and then get us all on screen and go through any questions at that point. Please use the chat as you go for any informal back and forward comments, but can you use the Q&A for any questions you want answering either today at the end or subsequently? So yeah, can you put stuff in the Q&A? Nothing you're going to see on this presentation is news, really. I think basically the Local Nature Recovery Strategy is bringing together probably 30 or 40 years worth of what started with biodiversity action planning. So a lot of this information is existing. A lot of the technical detail is existing. We're not inventing new regulations here. We're not inventing new grant structures or schemes. What the Local Nature Recovery Strategy will hopefully do is provide a real focus. So a geographic focus for areas for specific activity. I think highlight the urgency of some of the work around nature recovery and hopefully some additional incentive, either through the planning system or through the management grant system. We're obviously in an interesting territory with a new government coming in, yet to see how all that will fall. Some of the guidance around the LNRS is still to come. The overall LNRS is led by Devon County Council. It's being sponsored and supported by the Devon Local Nature Partnership, which is a group of bodies across the county. Their logo will appear in the on the right-hand top corner through the presentation. And on woody habitats particularly, we're leaning very heavily on all the work that went into the Devon Tree and Woodland Strategy over the last 12 to 18 months. So a lot of this is not new. A lot of this is brought forward from that strategy, including a lot of comments and observations from many of you on the screens and many other organisations. If I didn't say at the start, we are recording this. We will be circulating the slides and the recording to you and to others who were invited. And this is the first of what will be a consultation process over the next few months. This is quite a fly through. I'm going to go through the proposed woody habitats, opportunities and pressures, priorities, targets and measures, a bit on the mapping and a bit on the environmental benefits. Those bullet points there effectively are the stages and the structure that come out of the legislation around the local nature recovery strategies. So this is quite a formulaic process and quite a formulaic approach in the strategy. Many of you will be aware of this. Many of you, I think, on this will be already working on parts of the strategy. So, it comes out of the Environment Act. Responsible authorities appointed last year. So Devon for the whole of Devon, including Plymouth and Torbay. So that's one comprehensive LNRS for the whole historic county. Here we go. Sarah Jennings, who's leading this, isn't with us this afternoon as the process for the county, but yes, an expectation be largely completed by the end of March 2025. So good luck to those who are working on this process on that one. There's quite a lot to be done. Devon must involve supporting authorities formally, and those are all the other local authorities in Devon, National Parks and Natural England. And DEFRA, as the sponsor of this for government, is funding the process and issuing guidance. But as I mentioned there, some of that guidance is not yet out, particularly how the LNRS will formally embed with local plans. As I say, I'm just going to go through these slides. There's quite a lot in here, but we'll pick up queries and questions at the end. So yeah, do either put them in the Q&A as we go. Strategy must include description, county's wildlife, opportunities and pressures, priorities for habitats and species, actions, called measures in the legislation, but they are actions. Those two terms are used interchangeably. And then basically two maps, what's here already of existing importance and where we want to focus action. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So here's the purpose of the strategies in a summary. So help to guide where funding will go. So that's through the planning process, including biodiversity net gains, supplements, and through land management and ELMs. And hopefully private investment and external investment. It needs to link to the local plans, so the statutory plans and other statutories. It looks at the national targets. So for woody habitats, that will particularly be the 16.5% woody cover set out in the Environment Act. And it will be part of this national nature recovery network that the government will draw together from the entire England coverage of LNRS. It's there to help everyone, but I think specifically delivery does lie here with landowners, farmers and foresters. There will be a wider interest in community groups and individuals, but it is really down to those who have control of the land and the ability to bring this into effect that need to engage and be involved in this process. And we're aware of a number of other nature recovery plans across the county. The protected landscapes are producing them. A number of the local authorities have their own. So this all needs to mesh together into some sort of dovetailed overall approach. And we're in the middle there. There have been many discussions with a number of sector groups and individual organisations. As I said, we're reading a lot back through from the Devon Tree and Woodland strategy, in which many of you were involved, and listening to some of the feedback from that about areas that perhaps some felt were less well covered. So drawing forward some of those concerns. And we move through into a formal consultation early next year, publication. Well, March was the early date, but spring, I think we're probably aiming for. So we're in the middle box, informal consultation at this stage. So I'm going to push on through some of the more detailed bit about the woody habitats here. I think a key thing to say right at the outset here, there's a recognition at this stage, and again, this is all informal, we're in prep here rather than detailed proposals, but a recognition fundamental importance of all woody habitats in achieving nature recovery, from the ancient woodlands through to the individual urban trees. Therefore, all woody habitats are currently in scope and likely to be described as focus habitats. Our proposed categories at the moment, and this is likely to change, but hopefully you'll recognise the terminology here pretty well. Broadleaf woodland, wet woodland, mixed and conifer woodland, trees outside woodland, and come back to that in a bit of detail later. Wood pasture and parkland, ancient and veteran trees, traditional orchards, and then hedgerows and hedgerow trees. And we do recognise there's some overlap between those, but the aim is to find a home for all trees and woods somewhere within those. But as we get through into detailed targets and measures, we're going to have to explain or unpack some of the overlap there. So, for example, wet woodland is clearly broadleaf woodland, so we don't want to double count, but we wanted to recognise the importance of it there and draw it forward as a specific habitat. Alongside the focused habitats, which is the primary purpose of this briefing introduction today, there are a whole range of focused species. And again, this is just a snapshot, but those most relevant to the woody habitats will include a number of the mammals. The bats are being identified separately, of particular interest in Devon for obvious reasons. There's going to be both assemblages of birds identified and individual species, butterflies, and again, and I think Rob's on the call here, but that specific recognition of the importance of invertebrates in Devon across the woody habitats, particularly ancient and veteran trees, wood pasture, and lichens will come forward as a key grouping of species. Much longer list that this is drawn from, much more detail still being worked through there on where these species occur individually, where assemblage is important, and how that gets drawn forward into the mapping that we're going to need to do. So we must identify opportunities, and I'm quite pleased we can just get this on one slide. So I think the opportunities across all habitats, but not least woody habitats, is pretty simple, really, and it just draws on Lawton. The bigger, the better, the more joined up. And if you were going to put them down as 3 high opportunities, high level, it's restore and manage those existing habitats. There's a clear focus here in the LNRS on existing habitats, and then expand them, make them bigger, and connect them to other habitats. So those last 2 bullet points, the second 2 bullet points, speak to that creation and expansion. So the LNRS clearly washes across existing habitats, but has high ambition about expansion and extension. You could all write your own list here about the pressures. This is just the top 7 today, I suppose, or the ones in my mind when I put this together. So I won't really go through them in any detail, but I think that lack of appropriate management and neglect, in particular when you think about the hedged landscape, some of our woodlands, that's sort of a slow decline, really. But there are many other pressures and issues out there, not least around climate change, pressures on species selection for expansion of woody habitats, and the exponential increase in pests and diseases. So I'm not going to go through those in any detail, but the LNRS will, I suppose, detail those in some detail and identify the opportunities or the remedies for those pressures. The LNRS has to identify priorities. And it's unclear here from the guidance whether we identify a priority for every habitat and every species, or whether we group those together. I think as you see on the screen there in bold, if you're going to group them, this is quite straightforward. More larger nature-rich woodlands and woody habitats which are connected to a network of habitats across the Devon landscape. I think all of you on this call could probably write that slightly differently or wordsmith it in different ways. But the priority needs to set out where we want to be. And I suppose I should have said the LNRS, as far as I'm aware anyway, doesn't have a formal end date. We're broadly targeting 2050, We're seeing 2030 as a sort of an immediate sort of landing point for some targets and measures. But actually, there's no formal end date on this. The legislation allows for review, I think, either by the local authority, the responsible authority, or at government request. So these priorities don't necessarily have fixed definitive outcomes on them, but I'll come on to that in a sec. So that priority does set context for targets and measures, and it does, I'll come back to that. This is about existing sites and about expansion. Targets. Having just said what I've said there about when does this strategy end and what's the end point is, I think we're encouraged or allowed to include targets, but an LNRS of itself, I don't think is required to have specific targets. I'd be very happy when anyone's on at the end and we open up the mic to put me right on that, but that's what we're reading into it. However, we do need to reference government targets and other targets, and we are currently considering whether targets are helpful in the Devon LNRS. I tend to think they are, because they give a little bit of definition to your work, but they have been tricky to deliver on, and that's right back through the biodiversity action planning process and further back. So these are just examples of 8 targets that we might draw forward, and just an example of the type of sources. So, in terms of the more larger connected, that expansion measure, you've got the 16.5% woodland cover. I've brought the triple temperate rainforest area by 2050 from the Alliance in there. Hedge density, there's a target that comes back in there from favourable conservation status, possibly even written by Rob Walton if he wants to declare his hand on that one. And then reading into the tree strategy, the 3,000 hectares of the new woodland by 2030, that comes from the strategy. And then on wildlife rich, which is our tagline for the existing habitats, favourable conservation status. Well, that has to be a given for nature conservation, nature recovery, surely. And then targets there around woodlands in active management from the government environmental improvement plan. And then the short-term measure of 70% of woodland management from the tree and woodland strategy. And I even went back to keepers of time and a slightly oblique target, but restoration around pause by 2030. So yeah, whether these get drawn forward in this way and whether we tie ourselves to them is for consideration. Just on expansion, and of that 3,000 hectares from the Devon tree strategy, we are currently pragmatically taking that to read across all woody habitats, possibly apart from hedges, which probably have their own linear approach. We're still working on the mapping here, but for expansion, a particular target, a particular focus around new native broadleaf woodlands and wood pasture, new productive mixed woodlands. We see that as a key driver, with the commercial values for those woodlands driving towards that 3,000 hectares, and agroforestry orchards. Well, I had put hedgerows there, and hedgerow trees sitting within that farmed landscape and the sort of the updated environmental land management schemes. Cracking on, potential measures. So we've got to set out measures. Many of these are inevitably going to be universal and generic Devon-wide. Things like deer and squirrel management, issues like control of invasive species. Conversely, many measures will be specific to their type of habitat or their location. So in wet woodland, a measure is likely to be some specification around the need for appropriate grazing or the need to maintain hydrological conditions. So the the LNRS will have many measures in it, and they will link to the mapped areas that will come forward in the LNRS. And there will be supporting measures. So, there'll be need for further survey, mapping and promotion, although I have to say, hopefully not much. These measures really need to drive action, direct and rapid action on the ground. The less we go backwards to go forwards, the better. Mapping, fundamentally 2 maps. The bold wording is the wording from the legislation. The first map is areas that are of particular importance for biodiversity, so that's existing sites and irreplaceable habitats. And then the rather snappily titled areas that could become of particular importance for biodiversity. And in Devon, we're going to call that a nature recovery focus approach and a nature recovery opportunity map. That's the working title at the moment. And any area that's on a map shown for nature recovery must have a measure attached. So if we're showing land adjacent to an ancient woodland, the measure probably is expand the ancient woodland. So this is not necessarily terribly technical or terribly detailed, but we're still working through how to show this on a map in a way that works for people, the scale that they will be able to work with, and creates opportunity in the strategy and not anxiety. And within that opportunity map, from a woody habitats perspective, we're particularly going to be focusing on ancient woodland, so management of existing and expansion. Riparian, estuarine and coastal woodland is seen as key in Devon. That's come out of the consultations. Temperate rainforest, clearly we've got an eye on the state of the Southwest Rainforest report and what's come out of that recently, for those of you who read it, about potential expansion zones and the really high level of opportunity in Devon. And we'll be looking at unmanaged woods as well. Clearly, we're going to assume that managed woods have a head start on nature recovery, and therefore it's the unmanaged woodlands that will be of particular interest here. We're not creating new background mapping here particularly. We're looking at other information here, and there's a lot of it. So we're going to feed from existing constraints information, whole range of government and other information, and we are going to reflect that whole range of opportunity mapping that's already out there, and not least UCO and things like biodiversity priority habitat network. It is worth saying that because of the nature of the LNRS, we do not have easy access to a lot of existing Devon data, particularly held by Devon Biodiversity Records Centre. So there is a slight disjoint that the team are trying to manage around at the moment between actually the data that is available Devon and what can be made available to this formal LNRS process. And we've got to recognise other environmental and social benefits. So that there could be a weighting process here. So a new woodland opportunity in an isolated location may well give a carbon, flood, air quality benefits, but actually if it's adjacent to an urban area, it may weigh higher because of the social benefits. So this is not just nature recovery. We're going to have to weigh in these factors about other environmental benefits and other social benefits. So it's yeah, there's quite a lot of matrix assessment going on. Right, I'm going to go through on a slide each the 8 woody habitats, just quickly identify what's included in that habitat type, what the priority is, and then just a quick bit on high level type of proposed measures. And this will get repetitive. You'll see that this is quite formulaic. So we're relying on the National Forest Inventory, or that's our current working position. It's an annual updated data set, robust, reliable, doesn't always directly go across the national vegetation classification, but it's the one we're working with at the moment. And the priority is just a rewrite of the earlier one, more, larger, wildlife rich. So of course we need to think about whether we're going to write that 20 or 30 times into a strategy, or whether we pull that up at the high level and say, look, this is a given for all habitats. And then on proposed measures, as I say, there's nothing particularly new in this. For more large and better connected, we would assume that woodland creation or expansion will go through the normal regulation process. It will have woodland creation or a planting plan, and that will legitimise what's happening. It will regularise it, and it will leave it or make it more available for funding and support deliverability. So we are going to say one of the proposed measures is that sort of enabling plan process. And then this is pretty basic, this is woodland creation on a line, species choice, establishment techniques, planting approaches. And as I said earlier, this likely focus for broadleaf woodland, we're going to look for the bigger, the better, and the contiguous planting. So growing out from and expanding ancient woodlands, wet woodlands, estuarine, coastal, riparian woods, and or in the temperate rainforest. So there's a stacking of benefits here. I think hopefully you can see that starting to happen, that there'll be certain locations where woodland creation will have multiple and many benefits, more so than, let's say, a very isolated, fragmented, small woodland in the middle of a very agriculturally improved landscape. So there'll be a again, nothing new in this, but it'll be taken towards those areas of highest opportunity. And again, on nature rich, management plan, come on, if you're managing an existing woodland, it's going to have a plan around it or something similar to it. It's at the very least going to have a felling license. And again, this is, that's that last bullet point on this slide. That's a 3-year woodland management degree in one line, isn't it? Management to ensure diverse age, species, vertical structure, remnant features, open space, retention of dead wood and leaf litter. Broadleaf woodland is going to be very much focused on those nature recovery benefits. We're going to come to mixed and conifer in a minute. It's got a slightly different angle to it. I think we see wet woodland as a particular focus habitat in Devon. Others, points might be made here about whether we should have riparian woodland in here or coastal woodland, but wet woodland feels like one where we really want to try and both manage existing and expand because of many benefits. We recognise that it'll sit as a layer within broadleaf woodland. Basically, those broadleaf woodland measures will apply to it. Those two last bullet points there are probably, and I've mentioned them earlier, they're the two add-on measures that we really need to see in those wet woodlands to ensure their nature recovery and their favourable conservation status. Mixed and conifer woodland. So there's a recognition here that those existing mixed and conifer woodlands have significant existing value and should be managed for that. And their expansion, when done to the UK forest standard, which includes mixed species and included in broadleaf species, is clearly is part of that nature recovery story. And the measures here around expansion, again, more larger wildlife, it's the same story. The measure around expansion are pretty similar broadleaf, but the recognition that timber and carbon, and this planting with more mixed species mix with an eye on timber production, recognises timber and carbon there as key core objectives for a landowner, and welcoming that into the overall approach to the recovery strategy. As we work through the strategy, we will probably have to come up with some parameters about the proportions of broadleaf or the proportions of mixed and conifer, proportions of wood pasture when we get to it. But at the moment, that I think we want more land in this sort of opportunity mapping and allow willing landowners to fill that space than to try and overly prescribe or constrain what might come from this. Nature rich, again, that's about management of existing mixed and conifer woodland. Nothing surprising there, but a line there about particularly low impact silvicultural systems. So again, that's an entire textbook behind that, but continuous cover forestry, as opposed to clear fell. So that retention of a continuous cover, mixed age and species structure is clearly seen as beneficial. Trees outside woodland. So in the National Forest Inventory, this is all other trees. And I think Matthew's on the call here. So there's a bit of discussion at the moment about the updated trees outside woodland figures and how they're rolled out by Forest Research and Forestry Commission and indeed government. But they are likely to show a significant proportion of the trees in Devon are trees outside woodlands. And that's likely to push up the current canopy cover in Devon quite significantly. What impact that has on whether we see that we're currently quite successful or whether there's still more to do, I think it's got to be worked through. But again, and I should say we bring trees outside woodland in because it does slightly counterintuitively include small woodlands, and that includes many Devon woodlands. So it's important they're in the mix. But again, better managed trees outside woodlands connected to other habitats. And actually, the detailed measures here, because this draws in orchards, ancient veteran trees, hedgerows, we'll go through them quickly on the following slides. So I think this is the fifth of the 8 wood pasture and parkland. We think we rely on the Devon Ancient Woodland Inventory from 2024, published in 2024, which has a subset for wood pasture. That's the likely database for it, map base. And we're going to go for, well, there you go. You can sing along with what is the priority bit there, more larger wildlife rich. In this context, rather than looking back on the UK Forest Standard, which is what we'd be doing for the woodland ones we've just gone through, probably for our specifications here, our plan formats, our regulation, our grant, this is more in the territory of what has been countryside stewardship, sustainable farming incentive, and wherever elms moves to. So again, we want this to lock back into what farmers and landowners are already used to, and just how can we incentivize that to push forward, not create new specifications and new approaches. But again, we'd like to see more wood pasture and parkland. It's likely to have greatest nature recovery benefit if it's adjacent to existing wood pasture or ancient woodland, and likely to have greatest benefit in temperate rainforest expansion zones. And again, thought there about species choice and how the grassland, so obviously this is a mixed habitat, where the grassland obviously has as much, if not more, value than the ancient trees that might sit in the wood pasture. So this is a mixed habitat, and particularly the role of dynamic scrub in wood pasture. And in terms of management of existing, so nature-rich proposed measures for existing wood pasture, management plan, active management of the veteran trees, and a real focus on deadwood and the management of that pasture and that scrub. There's the ancient veteran trees themselves, highlighted for activity, because of course perhaps some of the very best are in wood pasture, but they are very widely dispersed, as you will know, across rural and urban environments. We're going to use the ancient tree inventory, but we recognise that's quite flawed. So this is, of all the woody habitats, this is the one that we're probably most nervous about in terms of the data. Do we know where they are? We want them all under active management, and we want them in interconnected landscapes. And again, this is more in the arboricultural area in terms of standards and specifications, and we'll look at the Ancient Tree Forum. I haven't mentioned it on the slide here, but we'd be looking to look at the sort of specifications the Ancient Tree Forum are laying out, and the training and accreditation to arborists around this in terms of management of trees. Creation of new ancient veteran trees is always a slightly odd one, because how do you know if you're not around in 400 years to check how it's getting on? But particularly recruitment and planting in existing wood pasture and ancient woodland is likely to have greatest impact, because you're creating next to those existing trees that have got those ancient and veteran features and the fungi and the invertebrates that go with them. And then nature rich is, what have we already got there? Proposed measures, a management plan for your trees, and then the active management of the tree and the land around it. So many of these ancient vet trees are clearly struggling because of the management of land around them, and particularly where we tidy up and we don't leave the dead wood around. Getting near the end here, traditional orchards, clearly a Devon priority, high propensity, high number of them in Devon, accurately mapped under the new National Forest Inventory trees outside woodlands. So I think we know down to the hectareage, we've got a good understanding of where these are and what we've got. And unsurprisingly, we want more of them. We want them better managed, and we want them connected to other habitats. And a bit similar to wood pasture, we're looking at the sort of countryside stewardship specifications here, which it's not rocket science. This is fairly basic and well rehearsed stuff over decades now of how to well manage orchards, and indeed how to create new orchards. So again, that focus perhaps on traditional orchard Devon species and traditional spacing and rootstock. So we're getting larger scale orchard trees that'll mirror the habits and habitats of existing trees. So yeah, both management of existing again here and expansion. I mean, I have to say, I get, so this is the last one, hedgerows and hedgerow trees. And I'm getting to this point thinking, well, this is all quite naive, really, isn't it? So let's have every woody habitat in play here, and let's see them all managed, expanded, and connected. But in a sense, that's what the strategy asks you to do. Set out that ambition. It's got to be a strong and bold ambition. We've just got to see what measures and funding we can put in behind it. Anyway. We're actually working on which map base we're going to use for hedgerows. There's 2 or 3 opportunities there, or options. Hedgerows have got quite strong national figures around density of planting. So the 10 kilometres, linear kilometres per kilometre square for favourable conservation status, and a target of 40, a standard tree every 40 metres. So we've brought those through into this slightly more detailed guidance here. So again, existing hedges, and I think I saw the BBC news the other day. I think Simeon, maybe you could speak to this, but we just need hedges that are allowed to grow more. I put their cyclical cutting every 3 years, but bigger and stronger, and more ability to host species and to carry fruit, nuts and berries through the winter. So not difficult to do necessarily, but it takes a bit of a change to the management regime there. And again, that restoration work around hedge laying, coppicing, gapping up, casting up, and new planting, focusing on areas of low density. So just to close, almost on time, all woody habitats in play at the moment. Recognise there's some repetition there, and you've had a bit of that. And as we go through this process towards adoption and consultation, likely to sort of simplify this language and draw together some of these habitats. Not necessarily, because they may warrant their own priorities and targets, but at the moment we're seeing some other counties aggregate this information together, but we don't want to lose the detail. And this is the last slide. I'll stop sharing now, but we're going to distribute the slides and recording to those on it and those who couldn't make it today. Welcome any informal comments or observations, and have a look at the questions in a sec. More information coming out during the autumn. So this invite went out quite widely around forestry sector, land management sector, and those of you perhaps more interested in things around orchards, hedgerows. So it's quite a broad group of interests here. So we'll either go for individual conversations during the autumn and winter, or perhaps bring you back together as a wider group. try and get together on site at certain places for a bit more of an in-depth discussion when more information is out there, and then formal consultation in the new year. Right. I appreciate I've just transmitted at you for some time there. I don't know how many of you survived from the start, and I don't know if I look at the Q&A what are the questions. Katie, is there anything particularly, do you want to come on? Is there anything that's been happening in the discussion that I perhaps need to pick up on? I've got one question there which I can answer, but if any others want to put them in, or I'll go and have a look at the chat. We can't, you are all muted, but if you want to speak, please do put your hand up and we'll come to you and just get you on the mic if that's an easier way of asking a question. Otherwise, I've got Simon's question there about was DWT's work on review of the ancient woodland inventory published? Yes, and that's the information we're relying on. And in fact, it's only in the last 3 or 4 months it's been put up on the government. It's on the Magic map base now. It's identified, I think, as new updated ancient woodland inventory, and I think it's just Devon and Essex there at the moment. So yeah, in terms of ancient woodland inventory and the wood pasture that was included in this review, we've got as good information as I think we're going to get on that. Anything in the chat that I need to go to without rolling back through and not doing this very well? So I'm just rolling through a bit of that chat there. Rob, Walton, your comments there about Kevin's research there in landscapes of moderate woodland density. Yeah, that would be an interesting one to go back to in terms of starting from that lower density rather than perhaps concentrating on the higher things like the teen or the dark where we've got existing high density. So the current angle is taking us towards those areas where we've got the valleys probably and quite a lot of existing, but good point, well made. We'll go back to that one and look at that one. Yeah, and Rob, also your comment there about hedgerow restoration. We've got a longer list of all the government targets. So there was a series of government targets in the Environment Act and then in the Environment Improvement Plan, and I think that's where that's come from, hasn't it? DEFRA 2023. So yeah, not on this high level fly through on these PowerPoints, but on the background, I think it's a 3-page list of those government targets that we should be contributing to. So the restoration targets in Devon would be part of that, whether we identify that Devon specifically should or could be delivering quite heavily towards that. Will come out through the consultation. And those of you who don't know, I mean, Rob's been involved with the writing and both the national and Devon level, so no doubt those targets will get drawn forward appropriately. Rob Dolby, hi Rob. Q&A wouldn't work for you. Are you in the chat? Can we directly monitor report on increasing connectivity? Well, I'm going to put this one straight back to you, Rob. I'd be very pleased to speak to you because I've been trying to track down the Woodland Trust team because I was aware that there is a methodology the Woodland Trust has been using for both assessing current connectivity in landscape and predicting the benefits of connectivity and the areas most likely to have highest benefit. And I had not got to the bottom of what that model was, Rob, but I'd really welcome an offline conversation or a link through to that model and that methodology and someone we can follow up on that. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, contact you would be great. So look in the Q&A. Thank you, Alex. So Roger, your question about the protected landscapes targets and outcomes framework. I think it's fair to say that's work slowly in progress. So we're aware in Devon of all this other work that's going on around, particularly the protected landscapes, about the nature recovery work that the national parks and the 5 national landscapes have undertaken. The response to the Colchester Declaration and the work around 30 by 30. So that there's definitely need to stitch back together, either before the formal consultation or during it, the fine-grained detail that some of the protected landscapes have been doing on this, particularly as you say on Target 8, and what is going to appear in the LNRS. I have to say, from my perspective as an external consultant working on the LNRS, this is quite a jigsaw to stitch together this. There's a lot of background data at different stages, and DEFRA is pushing hard on a number of different organisations simultaneously here. So to make this coherent will take a bit of work, but that's on the list, and I'll check on that one again specifically. Michael, time frame between formal consultation and publication. Good question. I don't have it here, and it's not on the slide, but I think there are 2 or 3 formal stages here, which we can put round with the note after this. Between, I think there has to be a formal consultation with the supporting authorities first, then a formal wider consultation, and then a certain period for response or for DEFRA to take objections, and then a formal adoption. I'd be making it up, but I expect it's something like 3 to 4 months between those formal stages. If anybody else knows that better than me, I'd welcome them answering it. But as it looks, that formal consultation in Devon's probably going to likely to be early next year. I think the reality of it is, and we are seeing a number of other local authorities and not attempt to slip on this, because DEFRA wanted it. The previous government wanted it by next March, but I think there's a little bit of just taking breath about what the new administration might want from this, rather than racing at it. But the formal time frame is embedded in legislation that will have to be followed. I suppose what goes into the LNRS and the time it's actually presented into that formal process. Well, all I can say on behalf of Devon is that's still aimed to be, I think, early New Year was in one of the earlier slides. I think, just flagging between the chat and the Q&A, and noticing, Rob, yeah, your additional comment there on connectivity, your caution there around connectivity, that would be interesting to see what that Woodland Trust model is saying around that and how that's factoring that in. Oh, thank you. So if you've got some initial data about connectivity for Devon, that would be enormously interesting to see. Thank you very much. Now, I know that everybody was hoping this would go on for at least 2 hours, but Katie, am I missing anything here? Is everybody, have they had enough of this and just look forward to rerunning this on replay?
I think you've got everything there in the chat and the Q&A. If anyone else has any final comments, please pop them in now. That would be great.
Yeah, no, I'm aware that we are quite a select gathering here, but that's fine. 2 or 3 of you are also involved in that LNRS process. Is there anything you feel you might like to add, either to just, not say correct or add to anything that I've said during this presentation? Do you feel that's a fair representation? Because we are all trying to follow quite complex guidance and make this land. Marcus or Rob, I'm not going to force you onto screen, but is there anything either of you would like to add to what's been said?
If either of you would like access to your microphone, please raise your hand and I can grant that. Otherwise, in the chat, please.
Marcus is typing. He's saying no. He's saying that was the best explanation of LNRS I've ever heard. Rob, can we open you up for a comment, Katie?
Yeah, I've granted you your microphone, so you can turn that on when you're ready.
Thank you. Just to say that I've prepared a profile, or basically an action plan, for hedges in Devon for the LNRS, and it's several pages of information and action points and measures and what have you. And if anybody would like to see that, and I'd always very much welcome comments on it. So just let me know. I'll put my email address in the chat. Thank you.
No, thanks, Rob. And I probably quite inadequately managed to summarise your excellent paper in that one slide, or attempted to. Yeah, I would. That's a very good read. And Rob, with your knowledge at national level, yeah, targets, the details in there are very strong and very good. So yeah, hedgerow should get a good reading in the local nature recovery strategy, and we're probably worth a chat over a coffee separately to make sure I'm channeling everything you've got in that paper appropriately. I'll let Marcus do his final comment, and then I'll sign us off. If Matthew, hand up. Katie, could Matthew have the mic?
Matthew, you've got access to your mic.
Great, thank you.
Matthew, do you want to quickly introduce what your role is?
Yes, so I'm a nature recovery advisor with the Forestry Commission. I'm working across 4 counties, so Cornwall, Devon, Somerset and Dorset. So helping the teams in each of those responsible authorities bring trees and woodlands to the forefront within those strategies. I think Ross did a really good job of summarising where Devon's at currently and the thinking that's going on. Pleased with the way that's all rolling. It looks to be really logical and make a lot of sense for trees and woodlands. As Ross said, there's a fairly select group attended today, and kind of almost to be expected. It's those with roles in local government and the NGOs that have found the time to come to this. It just really is a request that as messaging comes out from Devon, please do push it out to the private sector and to those landowners and land managers that own and manage woodland. It's important that we bring that sector with us, because as Ross said, those existing mixed and productive woodlands really have a place in nature's recovery there, and particularly if we want to bring pause restoration forward, we need to be connecting with those woodland owners and bringing them on board. So please do reach out and push that message out as more comes from Devon.
Yeah, no, Matthew, it's we've discussed it before, and it's and I wonder whether we might follow up from this. Now we've sort of rehearsed that. That's the first time we've sort of rehearsed that script that's been on the PowerPoint today in the way we have, and consolidated that. And actually, yeah, I don't know how it was for you, but that did feel like there was a reasonable. It was a bit rapid, but a reasonable flow. And I think we might try and actively promote that through COM4 and ICF and RFS in some way after this, Katie. So maybe in a little wash up, we might actively try and make the point that we want open conversations there as early as we can. I'll just Marcus, just pick up yours, and then we'll probably close because we're near the end now, aren't we? So yeah, well, I suppose it's fair to say that all I've presented today to those of you with a bit more of a woodland or tree focus is the woody habitats element. There are 3 or 4 other quite significant strands, equivalent size strands, of course, happening. Marcus is leading the one on the on rivers, water. There's grasslands, there's open habitats as well. So never mind trying to get our story clear and our overlaps sorted within woody habitats. how this connects with in a proper way or a helpful way those other habitats is, yeah, there's quite a lot of mapping work going on now, you know, daily, weekly, daily actually, you know, how do you try and look at that connectivity and those habitats collectively, and how does that work? And it's pretty obvious, but if you try and do that at a Devon scale across Devon, and then start to scale down some of these issues, at field level, there's a whole lot of interesting consequences come out of that we've really got to work through. But yeah, the environmental benefits, the point you make there, Marcus, we are being pushed strongly to look at where those stack on top of the nature benefits. Yeah, that's going to have to work into the scoring. Are we done, everybody? Or I'm going to leave Matthew with the last word.
It was just to say, Ross, could we hang on and I'll just catch up with you briefly?
Oh yeah, no, we'll do that. I'll stay on. Katie, maybe if you could stay on. But thanks everyone for coming. I hope that was helpful. We'll send the information through, and yeah, if you want to follow up and send any information back or any thoughts, we'd really appreciate it, because this is quite a collaborative process. We're not just delivering a standard product here. This has got to work for a lot of sectors. So yeah, thanks all. We'll send it out and look forward to further conversations. But yeah, Matthew, Katie, if you want to stay on a sec, that'd be great. Thanks. Cheers all.
I have stopped the recording and